Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Di Bussolo, and I'm the Executive Director of Arts Every Day. We are a nonprofit that advocates for the arts in every Baltimore City Public School for every student in every grade. Our mission is totally dedicated to Baltimore City Public Schools, but we work in really close partnership with Arts Education in Maryland Schools, our statewide advocacy partner. Our agenda for today is all about testimony, how to prepare, how to write it, what to look for, what to prepare for, and then also a couple of tips on creating pre-recorded testimony. We'll end the session today with some tips and resources for where you can gather information in preparation for your testimony. So step one, preparing for testimony. It's always good to kind of do some of the pre-work before you go into a testimony situation and do some preliminary research on your topic. So first of all, make sure that you know what the purpose of your testimony is. Sometimes you will be asked to testify on behalf of legislation, either for or against a piece of policy or a law that you want to share an opinion on. Other times you'll be asking for clarification on a piece of legislation or a decision process. This could be a policy at the school board level, perhaps a decision that they have not shared a lot of details on. And so the purpose of your testimony would be to ask for action or clarification on how this will be carried out. Sometimes you're asking for transparency in the decision-making process. You know, this is something that comes up from time to time, and you'll want to make sure that you're making a clear and concise ask and following that up afterwards. And then something that we have done a lot of testimony around is budget and budget decision-making at the district level. This also happens a lot at the state budgeting process level. So throughout all of the budget decision processes at both the state and the district levels, there are typically times throughout the year where the public are invited in to share their thoughts, ideas, and opinions. This is a great opportunity to engage with the process and to really understand how these decisions are made, what goes into that decision making, and what is really making the decision either fraught or very easy. Lastly, and this is something that is a perennial opportunity for testimony, is to really just bring awareness to an issue or concern. Because this webinar is being made for Arts Education in Maryland Schools, I'm assuming you might be watching this because you really care about arts education. And this is a topic that is rarely surfaced in a lot of school districts and sometimes even at the state level. We are always the last to be thought of because we are a non-tested area within education. So even if there isn't an agenda item that ties directly into arts education, we make a habit here at Arts Every Day of getting on the agenda of a school board meeting at least once a year so that they know that we're watching and they know that we are paying attention to what their decisions are. Where will you need to testify? This may be an opportunity to really think about where your topic fits best into the scheme of government and school district policymaking. We're going to start with talking about the state legislature. This is typically done within the course of a hearing. A hearing could be called to discuss a piece of legislation or as a part of the budget process. Hearings typically take place in committees, and at the state legislature, there is an education committee. So when you're thinking about where you are testifying, make sure you do a little bit of research around who is around the decision-making table within that testimony space. All of this information can be found on the state legislature website, and you can really begin to read the profiles of each committee member and how they might be thinking or feeling on the issue that you are bringing to them. Next could be a city-county council meeting or hearing. Again, this is a great opportunity to get to know your representatives prior to giving testimony. A lot of folks will go and meet one-on-one with their representative prior to a hearing to make their case. This is a great way to make sure that your testimony doesn't get lost in the sauce of all that's going on within a hearing day. The next is the state local Board of School Commissioners. This is a great space to really engage with the education decision-making process and really understand how decisions are made. Prior to going into any kind of testimony setting, I highly recommend you watch videos of how each of these places and spaces operates. All of these testimony opportunities have to do a live stream of their hearings. So it's good to look at what that live stream looks like, how they structure testimony, and what you can expect before you walk into that space, either through a virtual meeting or an in-person meeting. The next couple are specific to school districts and school buildings. Here in Baltimore City, the school district will hold town hall meetings on specific topic issues. A lot of them are structured around the budget process, and that's a really wonderful opportunity to have a direct connection to the budget making process. They often are not very well attended as well, which means that you can really garner a lot of attention for your issue, especially if it's an underattended event, and really get to know the people in each of those decision-making roles of power. Remember, they're just people, and you can go up and talk to them about what is on your mind and how you might be able to become active on that issue. At the school level, we have school family council or community meetings, and these are great opportunities for you to really work with your principal and with other parents. Here in Baltimore City, we do have schools that are required to hold community budget forums at their school building, and that is because budgets are decided at the school level. In other counties across the state, that decision-making would probably happen at the school board level. So it all depends on where you are and how your school district is operating when it comes to budget making. So the next thing is to absolutely know the requirements of the meeting that you're going to testify for. What are the protocols and timing for signing up to testify? Some require at least a day in advance. They close the sign-up sheet a day prior to the hearing. You want to make sure that you are in there and on the list very early on in the process, because depending on how contentious the issue is, they will have a huge list of people that are signing up to testify, and you want to be on the list when lawmakers and decision makers are still fresh and willing to listen. Make sure you review the accepted testimony formats and requirements. At the state legislature, prior to the pandemic, when everything was still in person, you had to prepare a written and oral testimony and bring several copies, one copy for each committee member in order to testify. So all of that should be on the website where you are registering to share testimony. Just make sure you review that prior to the hearing so that you can get all of that in order. So the maximum time allotment is usually 2 to 3 minutes. And honestly, you don't want to talk for much longer than that because you can often lose your train of thought and where your key points are. If you are submitting testimony through a virtual format, there's often size and format requirements surrounding that. So just check up on that. And then always look at a recording of a previous meeting. Are the meetings really formal and strictly timed? Do committee members usually ask follow-up questions, or is it just testimony after testimony? If committee members really do ask a lot of questions, really think through about what some of those follow-up questions could be following your testimony, and come up with just a few key talking points just in case that happens. And then lastly, have past meetings been really well attended, like packed to the gills kind of thing? 2 years ago when the Kerwin Commission was debating how to fund education within the state of Maryland, those hearings were filled. I mean, standing room only and overflow space. And there would be 30 to 40 people signed up for testimony. And so whatever that format is, make sure that you go in prepared. And if it's a really contentious issue and you think you're going to be there for a while, bring some water and snacks. Snacks are important. All right. So now that you've done some of that pre-work, you are going to want to choose a format for how you will be submitting testimony, whether it's spoken in a live meeting or a hearing, written and submitted ahead of time. And then in some cases, they do allow pre-recorded testimony to be submitted as a video file. Choose the best one that works for that particular meeting and that topic, and then we'll get into how to create your testimony and what to think about here. All right, when you're creating your testimony, the first step is going to be to research the issue. How did this issue come before committee, and why is it relevant at this moment in time? And then what are the laws surrounding it? Is it something that you can read up on through the Maryland legislative website? And also, what kind of iteration has it gone through? Is it in first reader and second reader? Have there been a lot of edits to the legislative text prior to the committee voting on it? Really think through what that decision-making process is going to look like and has looked like previously. Because if you're making a point that has already been edited out of the legislation, then it may not be something that is going to be considered at this point in time. Secondly, it's always good to think about and research what other groups are active on this issue. There are a lot of coalitions across the state that work on education funding. And so really think through and contact some of those other groups and find out what they are asking for. What are they really pushing for? Do they have other research that they've already gathered? And can you support them as opposed to just showing up as an individual? Coalitions are a great way to show that there is strong support around a specific issue and a demonstration of solidarity. Next, really think about who those committee members are. You've already done some of that research. If you do have time to meet with them prior to the hearing, that is always a good idea. And then take a little peek at what the opposition's view is. What are their viewpoints? What are their concerns? Is it about the price tag of education funding? Because a lot of that can really help you structure your testimony so that you're answering some of those concerns and you're addressing them head on. Next, you're going to gather information that really supports your case. This can be data, research, best practices, comparisons to other states, districts, and schools. But most importantly, you want to make sure that any kind of that quantitative information is paired with your story. Why is this uniquely important to you, and how does it affect your life? Because numbers are great, but they don't tell the whole story. Testimony offers you a really wonderful opportunity to pair your personal narrative and point of view with key data points that make your case. You can also include stories and anecdotes from others as well. Step 2, you're going to take all of that information and develop 2 to 3 key points. What do they need to know about your point of view? Make sure it is clear, simple language, and make sure that there is not a lot of jargon in there. There is a lot of education speak out there with acronyms and special terminology. If you're going to the legislature, keep in mind that those decision makers are not education experts. So you're going to have to help introduce them to some concepts, define some of that vocabulary, and keep your testimony very clear and jargon-free. If you are going to use data and statistics, don't use a million data points. Pick just a few that really, really drive your point home. And then, of course, make sure that you're personalizing it with your own testimony and story. So now that you have all of your points, you're going to begin to prepare your written testimony. You want to make sure that it's no longer than 1 page. It's polite and positive in tone, but firm, and that there is not a lot of extraneous information. If you're writing testimony for a bill, make sure that it's written for just one bill. And it's the bill that the hearing is for. The lawmakers do not want to hear a lot of extra information or thoughts on life. Make sure that your testimony is very straightforward and easy to understand. All right, I know this is a big slide, but we're going to work through it in chunks. When you go to write your testimony, you're going to be looking at a page. This header section is very, very important to make sure that it can be identified and tied to you as the person giving the testimony. So you're going to start with your name, contact information, and if you're representing an organization or school. It's always good to include your council or legislative district on there, because if you have a representative on that committee, they're going to look for that and say, oh, this is one of my voters. And so it's always good to include that information on there. Next, if you are testifying on behalf of the bill, you need to have the bill name and the bill number, so that they are clearly findable at the top of the page. And then always start within that big header section. Make sure that you state your position on the bill. Because when there are a lot of testimonies being gathered in writing, they're going to flip through it and say, okay, here's all of the positions that are for this bill, and here are all the testimonies that are against. If it is confusing or hard to read, it may not be considered. Next, you're going to have just a standard salutation. You can look at other testimonies that have been written to figure out what the proper salutation is. If it's a committee, then you're going to say, "Dear Madam Chair." If it's a commissioner, you would address it to Commissioner so-and-so. Just look around on the legislative or district website to understand what their titles are and how to address it. Then we get into the actual narrative of the testimony. We're going to start off by introducing ourselves and why we care about this issue. My name is so-and-so, and I am a parent of a student in the school system. And in your own words, make sure that you start talking about why you are submitting this testimony and why it is important to you. The second paragraph, you're going to clearly state those 2 to 3 points that you are making and describe how this decision will impact your life and your education going forward. Third paragraph, if you are testifying on a bill or policy, that's a great place to put in suggestions, recommendations, and other thoughts to consider, especially if it feels like the lawmakers haven't heard a diverse set of testimonies or haven't considered all of the possible ways that this could impact the community that that the legislation will eventually be implemented in. Okay, so your final paragraph, make sure that you thank your legislator or district leader or principal, whatever your format is, and then make sure that you reiterate your position and request an action on your recommendation. So I'll leave this up for another minute. The slides will have a worksheet that goes along with this, so you can have this in writing as well. Hopefully this is helpful in structuring your written testimony. So before I move on from there, once you've written your testimony and you've either delivered it live during a hearing or meeting, and you've submitted it as a written statement, it's always good to follow up in the next couple of weeks. I think that that's a really powerful way to make sure that the decision makers really know that you are not just showing up to the hearing, but you're actively watching how this decision will unfold. You can always send a thank you note to the committee and just thank them for hearing your testimony. But make sure that you follow the issue through to the very end and see how it evolves over time. So step 4, you're working on your oral testimony and you're going to the place, either it's a virtual hearing or an in-person hearing. Make sure that you are practicing that testimony prior to walking into the building. You can practice with a friend, you can practice in the mirror, but make sure you do practice and that you time yourself and make sure that you're not going to run out of minutes. There is nothing worse than giving testimony and then getting the flashing red light that you've run out of time and you haven't actually made your points yet. So you want to make sure that you time yourself. Same with written testimony. You want to pair your facts and figures with personal story and really convey a sense of passion and emotion when you're speaking. Always think about those potential follow-up questions. And then even if this is a live session and you're giving your testimony through speaking and you're going to walk in, give your testimony and walk back out again. If they permit that you are able to submit your testimony in writing, absolutely take advantage of that. especially if you are submitting questions for clarification or requesting action based on your testimony. It's often the best way to have a paper trail that you can follow up on. So, for example, last spring, a number of advocates went to the School Board of Commissioners and provided testimony at the town hall meeting that was about the budget for that year. We asked several questions during the town hall meeting that were not answered in real time, but we followed it up with an email to the school board office, reiterating all of those questions and couching them with context and concerns. And what was really wonderful is that we got an actual written response back. And it prompted action on behalf of the school board and the district administration, because we had highlighted an issue that they were otherwise unaware of. And so had we just stated our questions in the context of the live meeting, we probably wouldn't have gotten such thorough answers as follow-up. It took a little bit of extra time, but it was absolutely worth it in the end, and we were successful in what we were asking for. So that's where we'll land in terms of written and oral testimony. I wanted to include at least a slide about pre-recorded testimony. In some school boards and other settings, sometimes you are able to submit a pre-recorded video. And a lot of the same concerns and lessons apply for oral and written testimony, but there are a few unique opportunities that you have for pre-recorded. One is that you have the opportunity to be creative and incorporate visuals and possibly even performance into the video, but you want to keep it very clear and concise. The nice thing about that pre-recorded testimony is that you can do it as many times as you want and really work to make sure that you get it perfectly the way you want to convey your message. When you go to submit it, make sure that you meet the file requirements. Of course, you're stating your position and making 2 to 3 points, and also incorporating your own storytelling. When you finish with that video and you feel like it's gotten to the point where it is complete, send it to somebody else and ask for feedback. Ask them if your message really comes across loud and clear. Does your position make sense? And do the recommendations really flow well? And are they understandable? So pre-recorded testimony really is a great opportunity. Not every setting or legislative hearing will accept pre-recorded testimony. So make sure you know before you put that together. We'll end with just a few resources for research and data gathering. Of course, Arts Education in Maryland Schools is a great place to start for statewide arts education policy, data, and research. There are several national organizations, including Arts Education Partnership, that are a fabulous research consortium. I have submitted questions to Arts Education Partnership before, and they've actually gathered what research they've been able to find around that issue and then sent it back to me, which has been hugely helpful in building our case around different issues. So make sure you get to know Arts Education Partnership. Americans for the Arts also has some really wonderful advocacy and data, national data tools. And then lastly, National Endowment for the Arts. Always a good stop on your journey in understanding arts education related issues. For Maryland state education data, there are a couple of different places you can look for. You can read the slide, but definitely look at those professional associations. They are coming up with their own research all the time. The Maryland State Report Card has general demographic student data, enrollment data, testing data. All of that can be compiled to make your case in point. The Maryland State Department of Education Fine Arts Department has an incredible amount of information on their website. And that's a great place to look for standards and other state requirement language. And then Advocates for Children and Youth and the ACLU of Maryland, they also do really wonderful research and comparative research across counties. So take a look at all of those, and I'm hoping that those can really help you in your journey to create your testimony. So that is all that I have for today. This PowerPoint presentation will be made available, as well as that template for writing your testimony. I wish you the best of luck in advocating for the arts for your community and your family. And I look forward to meeting you along the way in the work. Thank you.